Okay, let's go over this introduction to Case 3. First, I'll cover the background. The main problem with data analytics learning is that the material begins from the bottom, reaching the top by the end of the course. Students are taught to use tools to analyze huge data sets without seeing why. The case studies in this course travel in reverse order, first focusing on the end result and then working toward how to achieve it. The sequence helps students develop the skills necessary to communicate the results of their data analysis to their superiors and upper management. All right, let's cover the instructions. In this case study, you're given a large data set of motor vehicle collisions in New York City. Download the case study 3 instructions and document and the motor vehicle collision data file to get started. Now, the file is large, so it'll take some time to download. Follow the directions in the instructions in the instruction document to complete the case study assignment and format your submission. Then submit the required files. The assignment's worth 40 points. It's due on Saturday at 11:59 p.m. That's of week 3, and refer to the rubric for more specifics on how this will be graded. Okay, so here's the instructions for case study 3. We're dealing with the motor vehicle collision CSV. Okay, reading right here. Okay, it's a text-based spreadsheet with minimal capabilities. Okay, CSV usually stands for comma-separated values, I think. Okay, purpose of the case study is to clean up raw data that will facilitate more meaningful information. This might be a project undertaken by a newspaper or a television investigative report, but it's also an analysis performed periodically by New York's Department of Transportation. Now, using the impact model, the first step is to identify what questions need to be answered. There were 2 parties identified above, but they might have different motivations for analyzing the data, so clear questions will allow you to itemize the objective of your analysis. Make a list of questions that the reporter and the New York analyst might be interested in. You should create a text box for those questions. And next, we need to master the data. Well, so I think we need to look at the data. Okay, so to look at the data, the problem doesn't tell you to load it into Excel, but I attempted to load it into Excel, and you could do that as well. Keep in mind it is a huge file. It's going to give you messages saying it's too large. If you save it, you might damage the file in some way, but we're not going to save it. We just want to see what it looks like. Now, to save you time, I've already loaded it, so let's take a look at it in Excel. Okay, so this is how it comes in. We've got one worksheet tab or one worksheet within this workbook, which is the same thing as the file. Motor vehicle collisions, and it looks like it's got a crash date, and you know to double click, it'll make the column wide enough so you can read it. So we've got a crash date, looks like time, what borough, zip code, latitude, longitude. You see the data is not perfect, right? Sometimes we've got street names, sometimes we don't. We've got some fields filled in, some fields aren't. Let me slide off to the right here. What other information do we have? Number of persons injured. I'll double, you can read this, but I'm just going to read off of this area here so we can see it. Number of persons killed, pedestrians injured, pedestrians killed. Okay, lots of information. Contributing factor vehicle 1, contributing factor vehicle 2, right? Some filled in, some it isn't. So you have some idea what the data looks like, and you can see lots of missing pieces of information. So the data is not perfectly clean. Okay, so now back to the instructions. It said we need to master the data. Okay, now the impact portion, by looking at the data, and we looked at it in Excel, you could also look at it in PowerPoint. This is where you're going to come up with your clear questions in the text box that you'll create within PowerPoint to indicate what those questions are, right? Entirely up to you to develop what are the questions. You know, I can think of examples like, Which borough had the most accidents? What's the trend in accidents? Which borough had the most deaths? Is there a common location where accidents are occurring? You could come up with any number of questions, and the data will help you answer those questions. All right, so let's look at this master the data portion. Load the data into BI. So let's do that next. Okay, so here's my blank screen, and we want to know where we're getting the data from. I'm going to try clicking on Get Data from Other Sources and see if it gives us a choice. Yeah, look at this, Get Data. We're going to grab it from text and CSV. So we'll say Connect to Text for CSV. It'll ask me to go find it. Now, you save this somewhere on your computer. You download it, probably in your downloads area. In mine, I've got it in a particular folder in here under cases. This is week 3, and there's our motor vehicle collision CSV file. So that's the one I'm going to load. I'm going to hit open, and it will let you know it's connecting. Okay, may take some time. All right, so there we get the sample. Looks based on the first 200 rows. So this is, you could obviously have skipped the Excel portion and looked at the data here. Same kind of effect. It's telling you what it looks like. Okay, now the instructions here tell us to load it. You'll see blank fields, some marked null. Null fields are empty, while the blank fields have a space or maybe an unprintable value. Complete the import process, ignoring the errors during the load. Okay, and there's more than 2 million records, so this is very large. So we're going to go back in and type load. And I imagine this will take some time. We get a pop-up window saying it's loading. Loading the data to a model. And then it starts telling us how much data is being loaded. All right, I'm going to pause the video just so we don't spend a whole lot of time watching this. Okay, you can see it's still loading. It's going to take some amount of time here, so I'll pause it again. Okay, now this last sentence says, complete the importing process, ignoring any errors during the load. There's more than 2 million rows. So we're at the end, and there's an error which we're going to ignore. We're not even going to view it. And we're going to hit close. And I believe it has been loaded. Let's go to the table view. And there's the information. And a short time later, the data shows up. Down here you can see 2,064,482 rows. Okay, now the next paragraph says, proceed to clean up the data using some of the techniques listed in the text. For example, click on the down arrow filter of borough, and you'll see a list of the New York boroughs with one of them listed as 0. Uncheck all the other boroughs and then delete that single record. Now, the blank boroughs are technically outliers, but they can still be important because there's so many of them. Okay, so here's the borough, and we're seeing a bunch of blanks. I imagine if we were to scroll down at some point, we'll see some other values, but I don't know how far down we would have to go before they show up. Okay, so there's Brooklyn, and I don't know what row I'm on here, but you get the idea. So if we click on the borough down arrow, it then tells us what are the values in that field, and we could take a look and see like how many of them really came through as 0. Let's hit OK and see what comes back. All right, so it looks like we had one row that came back as 0. This looks like just bad data. Maybe it's a total data, since we've got 329,000, or excuse me, 3,291,249 cyclists injured. That doesn't look like a single item. That looks like maybe it was a summary. Okay, so we went ahead and we unchecked all the other boroughs, and then we're supposed to delete that single record. So let's do that. So I'm going to put the mouse right on that 0, and I'm going to hit delete. Let's see what happens. Are you sure you want to delete borough? No, we don't want to delete the column. Okay, so here's what we want to do. Let's go to Home and then click on Transform Data. Now we're in Power Query Editor. Now, within Power Query Editor, let's uncheck all of these. Was it a blank? Oh, how come it's missing now? Load more. Let's click Load More. Okay, because it was just using the sample data. Now, this is one way we could do it, or I bet we could filter for the 0. Let's try doing that rather than loading it all, because that will take time. Well, didn't take that long, right? Okay, I'm going to demonstrate this again. So now we could take this off and put the 0 on. And now it's going to filter for only the 0. Again, 2 million records. This could take some time. I'll pause the video while it does its thing. Okay, it came back and there's our single row again. Now let's make sure it's the same row. And the way we would know it's the same row is we'd go to the number of cyclists injured, and we're seeing that same number, 3,291,249. So let's try a different approach. Let's go into Borough, and we're going to select all of them except the 0. Now, keep in mind, the total number is 2,064,482. All right, so we have 2 million rows, 64,482 records. We're going to take the 0 out. We think we're going to lose 1 row as a result of this. So I'm going to hit OK, and all of that will come back. And sure enough, it says 2,064,481 filtered rows. Now, we should be in Transform Data, and perhaps I wasn't. Yep, let me do this again. From Transform Data, we want to select all except the 0. Now, it's only compiling based on the top 1,000 rows, but we know there's far more rows than that here. Okay, now I want to step back a little. Now we're in Power Query Editor, okay? And we clicked on Transform, and in the borough we have 0, but we weren't able to delete that row. So here's what I want to do. I want to select all of the rows again, except for the 0. Now, at this point, we know there's 1 row that's not in the data set. Okay, we've already looked at our data set and we know only 1 row has a 0. We want to eliminate that. So we filtered it. Now we go to Home and we say Keep Rows. This is under Reduce Rows. And it says keep the top rows. but we don't know how many rows we want to keep. We don't know exactly what row number the 0 was. But we do know that we had 2064482. So long as we have that number, actually 2064481 would work too, since we filtered one out. But so long as we give it a high number, it will keep all of the rows that we have that we've selected. We filtered out 0. So let's try this. Let's hit keep top rows, and it's going to say how many. And I'm going to put in 2,100,000, right? The number of records was 2064482. I'm going to put in 2100000 because that way we know it'll keep all the records that we see on the screen, and I'm going to hit OK. All right, let's hit close and apply, and then we can go back to our data set and see what we have. So it's loading the data again. I'll pause while it finishes the load. Okay, now it just finished up, and you see now at the bottom it says 2064481 out of 2064481. So that's how we can delete the row. Okay, now that was just an example of how to delete the 0, but we did get a chance to see how to delete rows. But there's other cleanup you can do, and it's entirely up to you what you're going to clean up. A lot of errors maybe are irrelevant based on the questions you're trying to answer. So you may not need to clean up certain fields because the fields are irrelevant. It's entirely up to you. So you're going to go through and you're going to look at other data and either fix the data or delete records that are obvious. Like here's an example. They say there's a crash date that has a 17th century. So that may be one that we'd want to eliminate. You know, we're going to say we don't know what the date is unless we can figure out what it is. Okay, so as an example of the crash date, I mean, there's going to be a lot of dates out here, right? You could eyeball it and look for that bizarre date, but maybe it makes sense to sort it. Sort ascending or sort descending. So we'll click on sort ascending. All right, so I'm not seeing a crash date of a 1700. I'm not sure where that idea came from. All right, but I'm not seeing that. If we're sorting ascending, July 1st, 2012 is the first date. What if we sort descending? Do we see something bizarre? Nope. That tells me that at least the dates look like they're okay. All right, but maybe you want to do an analysis by borough. Okay, you want to answer some question about accidents by borough. We've got blanks. Is there a chance we can figure out by the street name what borough that belongs to? Can we fill it in? You know, do we have a zip code that may dictate the borough? It doesn't look like that's correct. Or perhaps we just say, because we don't have the data, we're going to leave that off and we're going to analyze the data that we have. Right? You know, perhaps the Van Wyck Expressway isn't in one borough, or there's a reason why it's left off. Okay, it's entirely up to you what you want to clean. Perhaps the latitude and longitude will tell you what borough it's in, and you can use the web, the internet, use artificial intelligence to help determine what those boroughs are. Okay. Now, as an example, if you're not going to prepare anything that relates, any questions that relate to the number of persons killed, then we could ignore this column. You could actually delete it, or just ignore it for purposes of your analysis. Perhaps you want to know what were the leading contributing factors. Then we're going to look at this and we're going to try to analyze what they were. Do we have blanks? That looks good. Entirely up to you how you want to answer the questions and present this one. Okay, just reviewing the data, seeing what we'd want to clean up. And once you've decided what type of questions you want to answer, that will lead you to know which columns are important. Then I suggest sorting the data in ascending and descending order to see if you got some funny values in there or empty values. You may want to eliminate them in your analysis. Or if you can figure out what the value is, put it in, or maybe you create an unknown category. All of this is entirely up to you. Okay, and to finish this up, I just want to point out, now we're looking at this in the table view. Once you put a report together on this, you would go back to the report view, and then you can add the various visualizations that's going to address the questions that you came up with. Now, I want to point out, you don't actually have to put visualizations together. This project isn't asking you to do that. It's asking you to put together text fields, right? List of questions for just create a text box, and you're going to turn in the text box, right? So that I can see what you entered and create a text box log of the corrections you made. So I'll see the questions, and then I'll see the text box log of the corrections that you made. And then you will save your PI project and you will upload the PI project. So on the report view, all you're really going to have is text box. You're going to go insert, and you're going to have various text box in here. Actually just two of them. One that shows the question, and then another text box that would show the edits you made to the data, and then you'll turn in the entire file. And keep in mind, what you're turning in this time is your .pbix file. That's what you're submitting. Okay, I hope you found this to be helpful.